Hello, America, and to our friends around the world, welcome to the Common Sense Show. We are the show that is freeing America one enslaved mind at a time. We're going to take a look at something that we don't walk down this path very often, but some of you who followed me for some time know that I've had about a 30-year fascination with quantum physics, and it was really accelerated with my relationship with the late Bill Pollock and Vance Davis, formerly of the NSA. And there is a lot more to human consciousness than we give credit to. Now, if you want to stick with the three-dimensional computer model, that's what our brain is like. Well, that's partially true, but it doesn't explain everything. And we're going to go through a series here, and it's going to culminate with looking at what people are telling us with their feelings. That's the starting block. And then ending with various scriptures in the Bible that describe the same things. And it gives us a perspective on where we are in the timeline. Some people think that we're headed directly into tribulation. My own pastor believes we're living in the end days. I remain, let's put it this way, I'm not skeptical, but I'm not totally convinced that that's the case. But I think it's becoming more and more apparent that that could be the case. But I want to look at this from a variety of perspectives. And in this particular piece, it's a culmination of something I've been doing for about 3 months where I've taken copious notes and done random analysis of various things in social media and listening to what people are saying. And then you get the repeat. And this is often research what we call not statistical analysis, not quantitative analysis, but qualitative analysis. And you look at things like frequency counts, similarity of content. And although I would say this is somewhat informal research, there's been a method to this, and a clear picture is beginning to appear. And I'm sure a lot of you will see yourselves in these comments that I'm going to give to you. And this is going to serve as the baseline, as a springboard into further examination, excuse me, at the time that we live in and where we're likely going. This is new territory for us here on the Common Sense Show, but there is a sense of desperation that is out there in society. And as I've said many times, you don't have to go any further than drive out on roadways in public to watch people's aberrant behavior that's greatly increased, putting more of us at risk. The random acts of senseless violence, not so much the violence rates, not so much the property crimes. There's some good news on those fronts from the FBI data. But in terms of crimes that make absolutely no sense whatsoever, the aberrations seem to be increasing. And this is something that law enforcement people have openly talked about. And we're going to explore all that as well, too. Well, we have a sponsor for this particular segment, and it's the good people from Nanosoma. And one of the things, I've been a user of the products, and they do improve lives. And we've got testimonials from people in our audience that talk about this, and there's no question whatsoever. And I want to call your attention to the 3-pack. And I think the mainstay product of all the Nanosoma Magic Dicol products is the liquid spray. It boosts your immune system in observable ways. In other words, it enhances vitamin C, vitamin D, and also increases the length of the telomeres, which is about cell health and longevity. And this doesn't cure anything, but it does boost the immune system that lets the immune system do the work. And if your immune system is compromised, this is something you really need to look at. Then there's the topical gel. You rub it on your troubled areas, and over time, it does grow pluripotent stem cells, and you do get relief from activity that would normally cause joint pain. And people ask me, well, how long will it take? It varies from person to person. A lot of it depends on how long you've had the condition and it's been untreated. Then finally, there's the skin cream treating cuts and burns. And there's some miraculous stuff that people have written in and told us about their use of these products. Together, this is the 3-pack. It goes for 15% off right now. and I would encourage you to act accordingly. I think everybody should have these products in their medicine chest because they're universally applicable. And we very rarely ever get anything that says, I tried this and it didn't work. I hear all the time, it works, it works, it works. And you've seen the comments in social media about this. Now, how do you get yours? Go to iwantmyhealthback.com/Dave Hodges. iwantmyhealthback.com/Dave Hodges. Well, before we launch into this qualitative analysis of what Americans are saying and feeling, I want to just point out to you, I had about a 35, 40-minute argument this morning with AI. What? Oh yeah, if you've ever done this, it's fascinating. You can have a discussion with AI. And a lot of AI bias has been exposed in different areas. The Today was no exception to this. I come at this pretty well armed with background in, my curiosity in physics, learning the principles, reading Michio Kaku stuff, who I think really is the preeminent figure in this field. And we look at what AI was telling me, and it's almost like they were the defender of the 1951 Invention Secrecy Act, which says if you invent something that could disrupt business, the economy, or betray government secrets, the government can come in and take control of your invention, and you can't take legal action. No, you can even be banned from talking about it. And it's called the Invention Secrecy Act of 1951. And I saw AI acting in that manner. And I'm going to expose that as we go through this progression of segments to talk about who we are, what we're capable of, and where humanity is going. And in particular, the United States, where it's going. It's conspicuously absent in end days prophecy. We can get into Gog and Magog, and we can identify that with the Association of Nations. But New Babylon, which often we're referred to, is not there. And you know what happened to Old Babylon? I hope I'm wrong on this, but more and more people are coming to this conclusion. But let's launch into what people are saying. And I'm going to give you the most common phrases that I have come up with. First of all, there's a blatant distrust for government, and there should be. There should be. You elect members of Congress to go there and represent American interests, particularly the districts that these people are elected from. For senators, two of them, they represent their state. For congressional representatives, they represent their district within the state. And they're constitutionally bound by an allegiance of oath to protect and defend the Constitution. But what I see every day is them trying to circumvent the Constitution for the benefit of their benefactors that put them in office. And we see that over and over, and I think that's universally accepted. And this has resulted in a 9% public opinion poll approval of Congress. I'm surprised it's that high. And, this is one of the reasons why I'm trying to sponsor this Toss Them All movement. And I will have to tell you, there are some politicians in Arizona that I've been in contact with and will continue to be in contact with that are embracing what I'm saying. Now, they want exceptions made, and I agree. Thomas Massie should be returned to office. I'm impressed with Fetterman and his common sense. I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but he's a guy you can trust because he says what he means and he follows through with it, and he's able to withstand the pressures of these despots like Hakeem Jeffries and these others that just try to put all kinds of pressure on him, and he doesn't bend. And we need people like that. We need people to speak from their conscience and try to do what's best for their people. And we're seeing over and over that is not the case. When you have 94% of the House and the Senate taking donations from Israel, they are bought and paid for. This is why we're in this war that's devastating this economy. And more people are seeing through it. And we're not buying the Ted Cruz that when I got elected to the Senate, and this is a quote, my first duty was to protect Israel. Well, wait a minute. I thought you raised your right hand and swore to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And people are seeing this hypocrisy now. If Israel's attacked, we are an ally of Israel. We need to come to their defense. We should not be doing what we're doing with this war. I don't buy the weapons of mass destruction. It's not been proven. It wasn't proven in Iraq, and it won't be proven here. It's the 24/7 universal excuse to go to war for other reasons other than what we're told. Anyway, I'm not going to go down that path very far here, but let's get into some more specific comments. I trust none of the politicians. They're all scum. This is common as anything. Um, People are wondering why are they surveilled to the degree that they are? And there's the part you can prove, and there's the part that's now caught my attention, and I'm wondering. In other words, let's have a discussion about going on vacation, I don't know, let's say to Tahiti. And all of a sudden, all these ads pop up on your computer about Tahiti. We've all experienced that, right? Okay. People are now telling me, Dave, I didn't discuss this with anybody, but I was thinking about this. And are my thoughts being read? I don't know if that's true or not, but this is how far people's mistrust of their surveillance system has gone. The government knows where you're at within 6 feet every second of the day if you have your cell phone with you. Or if you're in your car, there's identifications in your car now that are mandated by federal law, not just the kill switch, which has now been passed into law, but I'm talking about identifying where your car is at. Isn't it interesting they don't use that to find missing people? It's proprietary information. That's what I'm telling you. Okay, people are telling me this. Food tastes different. That's really true with fast food. This is what you hear a lot. Oh my God, McDonald's, Burger King, the stuff tastes like absolute excrement. And these are comments I'm hearing a lot. In fact, actually, within my own family, I heard some family members discussing how bad the food has gotten there. Um, we feel like we're in the Truman Show. I hear that a lot. You remember the movie The Truman Show? Remember that where his life was broadcast all over and every movie was making and so forth. And today, if that movie was made, they'd have DraftKings in there placing odds on his next move. So people are recognizing that we live in a surveillance spy grid state. It's very fascist. Um, a lot of people feel that the insanity of society is fostering a mass psychotic break with more vulnerable people. In other words, people that aren't as mentally healthy as most are becoming more unhinged because of the negative nature of society, is what they're saying. Um, People are increasingly saying that they want to pull away from the noise, that society is so dysfunctional, our government's so dysfunctional. I just want to block all of it out and retreat. I hear this from my own friends, people who have been very active in doing things like what I do is trying to expose corruption for the purpose of change. They're saying, I don't burn out on it. It just depresses me to the point where I need to get away from it. And a lot of people are saying that they need to get away from the noise. I hear this a lot. Okay. There's nothing normal anymore. We used to have a baseline of moral behaviors, behavioral expectations of people in public. And it's like people are totally narcissistic and into their own things and don't care about anybody else. And you see this really in driving habits today. This is something I've noticed anecdotally. The driving habits are becoming increasingly dangerous. Um, I'm beginning to question the meaning of life. You know my answer to that. Try your neighborhood church, but people are saying what used to hold interest for people is no longer holding interest for people. And then here's one big one we got, and we're going to explore this as we look at the argument I had with AI. And I got AI to admit it was wrong to some degree on this area. People are saying time feels off. Like I'll do a routine on Monday, and the next thing I know, it's the next Monday and it's rinse and repeat. And people are always saying that it's just time isn't segmented like it used to be. It just feels off. And people grasp at finding the right terminology to describe that. But I'm hearing this one a lot too. One of the things that people are concerned about is the fact that individuality is being drilled and legislated out of us. And In particular, recently, as we've seen homeless prisons begin to appear in places like Utah, coming to Louisiana, legislation in 6 other states that we've talked about, where they want to make homelessness illegal, but you got to pay off the fine. Well, if you could pay off the fine, you wouldn't be homeless, right? So then you're becoming an indentured servant. You might even call it slavery. And people, what they're talking about here is we're making behaviors that are unfortunate illegal, yet we're turning around and letting people with criminal backgrounds stay in our country when they shouldn't be here. And then they harm our citizens, and the courts are just fine with this. And many people are just fine with this. And so this is something else that concerns the people is the duality of our court system. You can't trust it. Our court system's for sale, particularly on the left side of the equation here. You get a leftist judge. The law means nothing to these people. The Constitution means nothing to these people. They toe the party line no matter how illegal or unconstitutional their rulings are. And you remember when Trump was trying to thin out the executive branch to save money, when he came into power, they tried to deny him that power. In other words, he's in charge of the executive branch, but we're not going to let you make any decisions. And people are talking about, the justice system just can't be trusted and that criminals are treated better than innocent people. And I think that there is a lot of merit to that as well, too. When we get into the more of the esoteric comments, and this is common, this is like time feels off, but people will say there's a different frequency vibration. Things just feel different. They taste different. Emotions are different. Attachments are different. And one of the ways that this is manifesting, and there's a lot out there on this now, is dating with teenagers, people in their 20s and 30s, young adulthood. And that you see this theme a lot. Men have had enough. And whether or not this is a valid criticism or not, it's a reality for a lot of men. On that side of the age equation, women are often viewed as grifters, gold diggers, promiscuous, and this is common. And dating has fundamentally changed in our country. In fact, actually, what I've heard from some women when I go and research what they're saying about life is they're in search of a mate. They'll go to a singles event, and it's almost all women. It's like men have given up. And that's not healthy, regardless of who's to blame or not to blame. That is not healthy. And then we're also seeing research that comes out to validate what older men are saying. If a man becomes widowed in older age or divorced in older age, they're choosing not to date. And for the reasons that you will most often hear is the gold digging aspect. Well, that could be more of a sign too of a declining economy. And whether or not those allegations are valid, this is becoming the reality for an increasing number of people on both sides of the age span. And this has direct implications on the health of our nation. And this is what got my attention. Um, a sustainable birth rate is 2.1 births per family. And you're saying, why 0.1? Well, because there's infant mortality and there are accidents that happen where children don't survive. So you need 2.1. No nation has ever come back from a birth rate of 1.8 or less. All of Europe is like at 1.5, 1.4. Italy's 1.2. What are we in America? We're 1.6. So when I look at these dating anomalies that are much different than what I grew up with, I never thought about these things. I never heard them discussed when I was in my teens and 20s, but they're here now, and it's having a direct impact on our birth rate, and it's not healthy. This is very bad psychologically, I believe, because we're meant to partner and pair. It's also bad for the economy. And where are we going to get workers? Well, maybe we don't need them because of AI. And that brings in the next comment. People are extremely distrustful of AI. AI replacing my job. Will AI one day become so sentient that it becomes a threat to humanity? When does AI take over and rule? I am not quite to that point, but I do recognize that many scientists have quit the AI movement and have said we have a lot to worry about with sentient AI. And it's probably something that we should pay more attention to. And people are feeling this. I don't know if you'd call it on an unconscious level or not. Um, One of the things you see too, when people talk about when did it all go wrong in America? Well, I can give you the date when the economy changed and when mental illness connected to things like hopelessness changed. It was around 2014. That's when we see a big spike in the mental health stats. But what really exacerbated it was the lockdowns. People could no longer engage in all the distractions that kept them from self reflection and finding out, hey, something could really be wrong in my life. I need to correct. They become so distracted. But now, in the lockdowns and the limitations on what they can do, all of a sudden people are forced to look at themselves, and there were overwhelming feelings of despair, hopelessness, depression has skyrocketed. Those trends, like I said, started in 2014, but they really exploded and got exacerbated in 2020. And this leads to, again, what people are talking about. They feel that there's a mass psychotic break going on in society where more and more people are just crazy, and they want to disconnect from it. This is not healthy for a nation. A nation that survives has to have overall general participation in the missions of that nation. And what we're seeing increasingly is the mission is perverted, it's bizarre, it's not serving the people, and people are disconnecting from that mission. So we're fragmenting as a nation. And this is the sign of empire decline. And when you look at why empires decline, there's a lot of reasons why I'm not going to get into here in this particular piece. But one of them is a disconnect from the mainstream culture. And we're particularly seeing this in people in their 20s. And one of the greatest tragedies of Charlie's assassination was the fact that he was connecting with people in a meaningful way where they would express their fears and their mistrust. And he would deal with that without tearing them down. And he got people, because for every conversation he'd have with one person, there were probably 500 to 1,000 people there that had the same concern. And they're watching this young adult man relate, not judge, help people process and bring them into the system with their thinking. Hey, you've got free speech. This is part of our government. We got to protect it. And you get to express these feelings because we have free speech. And you get to make these criticisms on the same basis. This was Charlie's main strength. That is totally gone from TPUSA. And if that's all TPUSA was doing wrong, I would not have been on this 6 to 7 month criticism of what they've become. They've become, really, in my opinion, an anti-American, anti-youth movement. They're certainly not representing what I think are Christian values, but I digress. But that was the value of Charlie in his work. And that's all been taken away now. And we needed a lot more Charlies and not TPUSAs today who say your duty is to serve Israel. And that's all we hear out of this group. By the way, I had a conversation with someone of note in Arizona politics recently, and they told me TPUSA is turning some politicians into corrupt ones. That was the allegation they made. And I have to say, I share that concern. Okay, here's some other things people are talking about. There's an element of paranoia in our society today, um, where we feel like our devices are now spying on us. This kind of goes back to the advertisement thing I mentioned earlier, but it goes further. Are there any parts of your life that are private? So you have your more intimate moments with your significant other in the bedroom, yet there are three manufacturers of TVs that are being sued in the state of Texas for spying on people. Yeah. And your TV doesn't have to be on, your computer doesn't have to be on, and your cell phone doesn't have to be on. And they're all armed with these surveillance devices. And we all know now the patents are public. We know the technology exists and we know it's being used. And that goes back to the earlier comment about the Truman Show, where we're under constant surveillance and then people's desire to disconnect from the system. And again, disconnection is a central theme in all of these comments. People want nothing to do with this control grid, but it's not slowing down. And I'm going to give you just one teaser here. There are some people, and I'm entertaining the thought, that think this is the war we're supposed to lose. In other words, we're not really going to be conquered, except we're inflicting so much damage on ourselves economically that we're going to go into severe decline. The dollar can't be rescued except digitally. You wipe out all the old debt by inflating it away, and people's standard of living goes to virtually nothing. And by the way, this is now the philosophy of the new Fed chair who takes office in 3 days. He has said that we're going to inflate away the debt. Well, that means your savings is going to be worth nothing. And people who are in tune to this are saying this could be the war that caused this to happen. And the alternative is Peter Thiel, chief advisor to the president, and his people are on his science and technology board, as we've talked about, and that these people will usher in the digital age. That means that whoever controls the digital controls your money. Right now, you can spend your cash as you please. Digital becomes a matter of approval. And there are many people that are beginning to see through this, and they're very, very concerned. And you say, well, Dave, is there any basis in fact for this? I would say go to the big, beautiful bill and take a look at stablecoin. Stablecoin has been positioned as a digital currency to rescue the dollar, but make it digital. So people that are expressing this fear aren't out to lunch. They're not engaging in hyperbole and wild speculation. There's basis for what they are saying. Now, whether or not this comes to fruition, we could argue that, but I would say we're certainly moving in that direction. And the Fed chair we have right now, if you're going to inflate away the debt, which by the way, the interest on the debt's our number one national expense, $1.2 trillion a year. But if you're going to inflate that away, you're destroying the dollar. Well, what are you going to replace the dollar with? Do you really want a civil war? So they're going to replace it with digital. And what's digital? Total control. So take all these things that I've observed in a random analysis of social media. You take all these things, and it comes down to people don't want to be controlled. They don't want to be managed to a micro level. But that's exactly what digital can do. So I think these fears are well founded. I don't know if they're as focused as what I just gave you, but people are feeling a sense of uneasiness. Tell me how you feel. I wonder, this should spark a lot of comment. Now, we're not being shared out here and people tell me all the time, Dave, we don't get the ability when you're on social media to subscribe. We're missing that tab. And it could be their individual problem, but I don't know. And that I have trouble sharing. I'm going to ask you for this particular piece. Share this far and wide because I would like to do a secondary analysis of what people think. And if you're critical of this, fine, express the criticism because personally, my bias is I wish none of this was true. I'd like for all this to be wild speculation and we have nothing to worry about. And our leaders truly care about us. And they have our best interests at heart. And tomorrow's going to be better than today. Although I will say this, I'm going to leave you with this thought because this is not meant to be a rendition in hopelessness. One of the people I studied when I was a psychology student was Viktor Frankl, and he was an Auschwitz survivor, 4 years in the death camp, and he was actually a very prominent psychologist. He studied under Sigmund Freud, and but he totally broke from Freud. as a result of his death camp experience. He once said this. He said, "Your life is a prison, and your freedom is the space between the prison bars. If you have wide bars and you can come and go as you want, you have a lot of freedom. If you impose on yourself narrow bars of constriction, well, then you have very little freedom, very little choice." In other words, we can choose our own level of happiness. We can choose our own level of freedom to a large extent because, at least up until now, no one can really control what you think. He used to talk about watching the birds fly over the death camp he was in. And he said, "I imagined for a moment I was the birds and I could go anywhere I wanted, see anything I wanted." And he said it was that fantasy that kept giving me hope. And one of the things that I'm concerned about when I look at what people are saying is they're losing hope. And what Viktor Frankl said about people in the death camp was very pointed. He said that one day someone would just get into their cot, pull the covers over their head, and die. They just gave up. He said those that survived found meaning in their suffering, and it produced hope that they could make it better. And he wrote a classic book on this, Man's Search for Meaning. And it's certainly not the Bible, but I think it's a Bible for daily living and proper interpretation. That is something that I would highly recommend. Viktor Frankl, and you spell the last name Frankl, because although, yes, I do think we're in more difficult times than we've been in, as reflected in these comments, I still think you have the ability to control your thought processes to a large degree. But that's not the way modern psychology works. It's a lot like the medical model, folks. It's get the person better in 6 visits, or we're not going to fund your next visit, say the insurance companies. That's classic. And all you people who are therapists out there are now shaking your head, yes. Yeah, that's true. We treat symptoms, we don't treat root causes. Same as modern medicine. We have a sickness model, not a health model. And we don't promote healthy thinking. We promote make yourself feel good in the moment, which really kind of leads you into really negative things. A lot to think about. Look forward to your comments. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here again next time.